class, we are going to learn about the introduction of the cell, okay?
Yes.
First, we're going to start with a fun video that'll quick teach you about some parts of the cell.
Today's the day we're gonna learn about the cell. If I teach it okay, you'll know it very well. So listen up, 6th graders, let's talk about the building blocks of life. Cells are made of cells. They're made of organelles. Try to pull it fast when the cytoplasm gels. The nucleus takes over, controlling everything. The party don't stop till the membrane box is seen. Inside the vacuole, we can float around for hours, running around with chloroplasts, loving sunlight showers. Cells, they're made of organelles. First things first, there's two different types. Animal and plant cells that make up all life. The little things that make up microscopic cells, the main structures there, we call them organelles. Now let's break it down and get some information. How do cells work? It's a crazy combination. Cells, they're made of organelles. Try to pull it fast when the cytoplasm gels. The nucleus takes over, controlling everything. The party don't stop till the membrane box is seen. Inside the vacuole, we can float around for hours, running around with chloroplasts, loving sunlight showers. Cells, they're made of organelles.
Okay, so let's recall a few of the cell organelles from the video. What were some that you remember?
Nucleus.
Perfect. What's another one?
Membrane.
Good. Cell membrane. Let's do one more. What holds everything in there? What's all that called? That gels up when they try to move out.
Organelles.
The organelles are the parts that we're labeling right now. Even though this is not an organelle, what's all of that in there that holds them all together? Do you remember the name? Starts with a C.
Citric. Oh.
Cytoplasm.
Yes.
Does that sound familiar? All right. And there was one part in the video that recalled something the plant cell has that the animal cell doesn't. It's on the screen right now.
Chloroplasts.
Perfect. Chloroplasts. And we're going to talk about these cell organelles and a few more in class today. So, does everyone know what a cell is in general?
Yes.
Perfect. Do you know about how big a cell is?
Microscopic.
Good,
Very
so we
small.
can't see it with the human eye, right? We need a microscope to see it. Good. And we saw a little bit about what cells are made of. So cells are the basic structure of human life. And they're so small we cannot see them with the naked eye, as you mentioned. The human body has 10 to the 13 cells, which is this many, to make us.
Wow.
That is a lot of cells, and a drop of blood has similar to the number of cells as the people in New Zealand has, which is millions, just in a drop of blood. So, now we're going to want to know a little bit more about cells. So here is a guided note sheet. Please follow along as we go through the notes. It will go through each slide that we go through in the lecture. So first let's start with cell theory. Cell theory is made of 3 parts. The first being that all living things are made of cells. As we saw in the video, there are different types of cells, but all things that are considered living have cells in them. As I said earlier as well, the cell is the smallest living unit of structure and function of all organisms. And all cells arise from pre-existing cells. So they don't just come out of nowhere. This is kind of like what we talked about before, how energy cannot be created or destroyed. It has to be transferred, so it's the same kind of thing for cells. So as I talked about, cells are very small, and as you mentioned, we cannot see them with the human eye. So here's some reference sizes for you. A typical plant cell is 10 to 100 micrometers, and a chloroplast is 2 to 10 micrometers in there, micrometers. And here's a bacteriophage, which we'll talk about later. It's how you get sick. It's 225 nanometers long. So the characteristic of all cells is that it has a surrounding membrane. As you mentioned, all cells have the cell membrane. It has the protoplasm, which is the thick fluid, and organelles, which is what we talked about from the video, that all cells are made of organelles. It's in our rat video. As the video mentioned, we have prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So first we're going to talk about prokaryotic cells. These were the first cell type on Earth, and it is the cell type of bacteria and archaea. And here we can see some of the parts of a prokaryotic cell. We have a plasma membrane, a cell wall, some DNA, and ribosomes. Some prokaryotic cells also have a flagellum, which is how they move. It whips its tail and they can move along. Prokaryotic cells also do not have a membrane-bound nucleus, and the organelles are not bound by membranes either. Everyone good on this slide? Okay. Alright, so some information about the eukaryotic cells. The nucleus is bound by a membrane, unlike prokaryotic cells, which do not have membrane-bound nucleus. Some examples of a eukaryotic cell is fungi, protists, plants, and animal cells. One way I want you to remember eukaryotic cells is that it starts with U. You are made of eukaryotic cells.
That was helpful.
Good. So here is an example of what an animal cell would look like. I know this is a lot of parts. You don't have to know them all right now. Some of the important ones that I want to point out where they are is the mitochondrion. It looks like this in the cell. It looks kind of like a half moon shape. The lysosome looks like a oval with a bunch of dots in it. I'm sorry, the mitochondrion is this. This was the Golgi apparatus that looks like the moon shape. The mitochondrion looks like a oval with a bunch of like squigglies in it, is how the mitochondrion will look in the cell. The control center of the cell is the nucleus, which is shown right here. The nucleus is protected by the nuclear envelope. That's fine. Here's an example of a plant cell. One major difference between the animal cell and the plant cell is that the plant cell has a cell wall, which is a tough outer shell, where we just have a cell membrane, which is semi-permeable, which means certain molecules can get through in and out of the animal cell, but plant cells have a tough cell wall, which holds their shape. Okay, so next class we will talk more about the plasma membrane, which is what we touched on a little bit in this lesson. It's the semi-permeable bit that I was talking about. So it contains a lot of the cell contents. It keeps everything in. It also lets certain things in and out, as I said. And it is made of a double layer of phospholipids and proteins, they're called. we'll talk more about that next class. But as for this class, do you have any questions?
I missed this section of, under cell theory, the shape of a cell depends on its,
Oh, okay, so we're going to get more about this next class.
okay,
This is important. This is the topic of the next class. The shape of a cell depends on its function.
okay,
So, like I said, plant cells have a cell wall. They're shaped differently than animal cells, which is because its function is different than an animal cell. So we'll get more into detail on that later, but that is really important right there, so I would star that.
okay,
We're going to talk more about structure and function and how those two are related next class.
okay.
Do you have any other questions?
I do. I think I misunderstood what prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic, is that plant cells or is eukaryotic? I know I remember you saying you with the EU, so that was good to remember that, you as in a person. But is prokaryotic then a plant?
No. Eukaryotic, so let's go back to this so that it does not confuse everyone.
Okay.
Eukaryotic cells include fungi, protists, plant, and animal cells.
Oh, okay.
While the prokaryotic cells were just the first type of cell on Earth. They're the very basic cell.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, so they don't have a membrane-bound nucleus, while both the animal cell does have a membrane-bound nucleus, as well as the plant cell does have a membrane-bound nucleus.
Okay, now
So
I
that will be a
understand.
eukaryotic cell, not a
Okay.
prokaryotic cell.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you, I understand that so much better now.
You're welcome. Okay, so next class, we will talk more about the cell, structure versus function, and about the plasma membrane, the cell membrane in general, which is one of the parts of the cell that you recognized from the video. So we'll talk more about that next time.
Okay, thank you.